Good evening. The St Kilda Football Club has been rocked by the shock departure of coach Ross Lyon. Signing for 4 years, he's been headhunted by the Fremantle Dockers after the axing of Mark Harvey. Michael Felgate was at Lyon's media conference in Perth. Michael...
As much as we like to celebrate greatness in this sport, sometimes it's just as exciting, if not more, to talk about the teams that didn't quite make it and ask, what if? What if the actual most dominant Richmond side of their run was in 2018? And what if they beat Collingwood in that preliminary final? What if Port Adelaide had that decision go their way in the dying seconds of the 2014 prelim? What if Lenny Hayes broke his tag in 2009? And what if the 2013 Fremantle Dockers could actually kick straight? Fremantle are one of just 3 teams in the league to never have won an AFL Premiership. They got close in 2006 with the Peter Bell prime Matt Pavlich anchor era, but in late 2011, they saw their realest chance yet to go and get one. It's September 10th, 2011, and Ross Lyon has just finished coaching his last game at St Kilda, but nobody knows it yet. After taking St Kilda to 3 straight grand finals, including the draw, Ross's 2011 season with the Saints started sluggish. Despite recovering throughout the later half of the season, they couldn't quite rediscover their form of the previous years.
We'd lost in 2009, essentially climbed the mountain again and got pushed off the top or got pushed halfway back down in the drawn grand final. It was like, shit, are we ever going to do this? And mentally we were just cooked. That was the biggest difference.
Following an elimination final loss to Sydney, St Kilda began their end of season proceedings. Speculation about Ross's tenure wasn't present, with the reports saying that he was comfortable and happy at the Saints amid some swirling offers from the likes of Melbourne. But in a twist nobody saw coming, on the Wednesday evening following their loss, Lyon told Saints CEO Michael Nettelfold that he was exercising the exit clause in his contract and declining the 3-year extension that had been put in front of him. Safe to say, this blindsided everyone. A coach that had just led St Kilda through one of their most successful eras in a long, grim history, resigning out of nowhere. But it wasn't quite out of nowhere. That very same day, all the way across the country, the Fremantle Dockers, in an equally shocking move, sacked their long-term coach, Mark Harvey. Journalists started to put 2 and 2 together, and when Ross was caught red-handed at Melbourne Airport the next morning at 6 a.m. boarding a plane to Perth, it was over. It's safe to say that the move was controversial. Ross resigning with 1 year to go in his contract and joining Fremantle all just 4 days after St Kilda had lost an elimination final indicated that they had been meeting and colluding during the back half of the season, and that Lyon potentially had one foot out the door whilst coaching the Saints through a finals campaign. St Kilda were outraged, and so was Mark Harvey. He told Perth media that he was shattered and blindsided by Freo's decision to axe him. Even Ross Lyon's management cut ties with him after it was revealed that he had met with Fremantle completely in secret. You see, his management also represented Mark Harvey, and the conflict of interest meant that Lyon couldn't even tell his own agent what he was doing. Immediately it was described in the media as a backstab.
Ross, do you feel you've stabbed Mark Harvey in the back?
Not particularly, no. I've been headhunted by the Fremantle Football Club.
The move not only blindsided St Kilda, but even the Fremantle players, with skipper Matt Pavlich having no idea about the move.
Pretty surprised at, I guess, how swiftly things came to a head and how swiftly the club acted. I think it just reminds us all how brutal and ruthless this industry is.
It was revealed that Dockers CEO Steve Rossich had approached Ross on September 4th after Freo had been knocked out of finals contention, and 7 days before St Kilda's elimination final. But he claimed that the discussion was with the intention of bringing Lyon in for the 2013 season. But when St Kilda lost the elimination final to Sydney, Ross told Fremantle he was ready to go. The timeline is so tight that Mark Harvey and Ross Lyon were at Perth Airport at the exact same time, one departing and one arriving. Ross Lyon says that he had no idea about the relationship between Harvey and Fremantle and that he merely accepted an offer that was put in front of him. However, the move received condemnation from most of the league. Many say that Fremantle's poor performance in 2011 can be attributed to injuries and not Harvey's coaching ability. Towards the end of the 2011 season, Freo had to ask special permission to upgrade 2 rookies to their main list just to play in round 24 because that's how many injuries they had. But it seems that Fremantle saw an opportunity to get a proven coach and took it. And the grim part is, as harsh as a move as it was, it worked. 2012 was a big improvement for Fremantle. They won 5 more games and finished 7th to qualify for their 4th final series. They then caused an upset by winning a final away from home at the MCG versus a hot Geelong side on the back of Matt Pavlich's bag of 6.
Is this the end for the great Matthew Scarlett? That man there, definitely not.
Conversely, the Saints got worse, missing finals for the first time in 5 years under Scott Waters. Post-2012, the Saints saw a mass exodus of the bones of their grand final teams, and the hole that Ross Lyon left behind was truly exposed when they finished 16th in 2013 and won a wooden spoon the year later.
Schneider, and that's it. What a career. What about that grand final? And what a
Because of what he went on to do at Fremantle, the controversy of Ross's departure from St Kilda was largely forgotten. But the move at the time was one that confused the whole football world. Watching what happened with Oscar Allen and Sam Mitchell earlier this year, you wonder if a secret hiring like this would even be possible in the modern day. Ross Lyon's coaching style in this era was well documented. Defensive flooding pre-666 era was his calling card. Fremantle finished with the second fewest scores against in 2012, and yet they finished 7th overall. In season 2013, they had the best defensive rating in the comp and finished in the top 4 for just the second time in club history. They improved rapidly under Ross Lyon, having adapted to his coaching style and stacked up a phenomenal season, finishing just below the perennial Geelong and Hawthorn. This Fremantle team was one that was genuinely assembled over the course of the previous 2 decades, all coming together under a Ross the Boss game plan that had taken over the league. It's also a team that's pretty fun to reflect on. Matthew Pavlich had become a genuine champion of the game and was already the greatest player the Dockers had ever had. Elsewhere, it was firmly recognised that Fremantle had lost the McFarlane-Crowe trade in the early 2000s as the picks they lost became Sam Mitchell and Luke Hodge. But the irony of Luke McFarlane having a chance at the last laugh against his old club in the 2013 grand final was a tantalising prospect. Nat Fyfe was in the infancy of being the superstar midfielder he would become. Aaron Sandilands was one of the best rucks of all time. Ryan Crowley was one of the best taggers of all time and flourished under Lyon's coaching. I could go into all of them, but some of these names are truly all-time on the streets we'll never forget list. Chris Mayne, Michael Johnson, the little antagoniser Hayden Ballantyne, Nick Subin, a prime Sonny Walters, tagging legend Matt DeBoer, a baby Lockie Neal, and the poster child of the AFL, Zach Dawson. The Ross Lyon game plan that had worked so well at St Kilda was now excelling in the West. But despite its success, it was despised across the league. The boa constrictor style is built around turnover footy. There's a contest, you use the ball, and then when the opposition gets it, you get it back as fast as you can. In execution, it involves an extremely fit side that outworks their opposition and puts crazy downfield pressure on the space where the ball might go. Ross was ruthless. He rested 10 players in Freo's last home and away game of 2013, resulting in the worst defeat of his career, which the AFL took massive issue with. But he didn't care. He wanted to win. Freo headed into the finals in 3rd place and executed 2 incredible victories in a qualifying final upset against Geelong at the Cattery, and then knocking off the reigning premiers at home to book the club's first ever grand final.
Fremantle will play Hawthorn in the grand final. Siren sounds, 25 points.
The Thursday night before the grand final, sports historian Stephen Alomes published an article in The Age essentially declaring that if Ross Lyon's team won on Saturday, it would spell the death of the game. You see, 2013 has a case as being one of the most insane years in the AFL's long history. Between the supplement saga, the match-fixing ploy, and the most player indiscretions the game had seen in years, it was a tumultuous time at AFL House. Most people weren't focusing on the game because there were so many off-field issues to look at. And when people did decide to watch the top teams play, they were witnessing low-scoring defensive scrambles that had no TV value. Alomes doesn't entirely blame Lyon, merely that Lyon was the cherry on top. He name-dropped Paul Roos, Rodney Eade, Mick Malthouse, and labelled them evil geniuses. He identifies what the game had become as tackle ball, thanks to the then successful coaches trying to outdo each other in the art of win-at-all-costs coaching. Floods, stoppages, the love of the boundary line had resulted in a game style that was tough to consume. The accusation was that modern coaches, which Lyon typified, were acting within the rules of the game, but equally destroying it. And Stephen Alomes stated very firmly that for the good of the game, Hawthorn must win the clash against Fremantle on Saturday. because if Ross's strategy could be proven to work, it would become the new normal. So, on Saturday the 28th of September, Fremantle went head-to-head against a Hawks team with grand final defeat fresh in their memories. And this would become one of the more fascinating grand finals of the 21st century. Hawthorn started well, with the first of many Jack Gunston goals coming in just the 4th minute. Luke McFarlane would then give away an inexplicable 50-metre penalty for stepping over the mark that he would presumably regret to this day. But the story of the first quarter, and the story that would prevail over the course of the whole afternoon, was Fremantle's inaccuracy. Hayden Ballantyne and Nick Subin missed easy shots on goal, but the biggest misstep was from a young Nat Fyfe, who had kicked 12 goals won from set shots through the season, stepping up to shank 2 set shots out of bounds on the full. The second quarter was a similar story. Gunston and Cyril goals, Pavlich and Fyfe military behinds. Fremantle would go into the halftime break down 23 with a score of 1-6, the lowest grand final halftime score in 53 years. The third quarter, however, was a different story. Freo mounted a comeback and kicked 3 goals in 7 minutes to come within 3 points of the Hawks, but an additional 4 behinds left them 10 points behind at the final break. And in the last term, the Hawks found their way ahead, capitalising on Freo's inability to hit the scoreboard and stretching the lead to over 5 goals. And we thought it was all over. But Ross's Dockers made a brave and exciting last dash at a premiership. Goals to Daniel Pearce and Matt Pavlich put them within 17 in time on, and in the last 10 minutes of the game, Fremantle had 4 attempts at scoring to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. And they all missed.
Bunny may get the last touch. Dawson deprives him. They've done it. The best team all year. Last year so difficult for them.
Fremantle would lose, and Hawthorn would avenge last year's defeat. And that's the story that stuck. Because Hawthorn would go on to win the next 2 and create the most modern football three-peat, this grand final got lost to time. The sentiment is that the Hawks were too good and Ross Lyon failed again on the biggest stage. But analytically, the story gets even worse for the Dockers. Now first off, Hawthorn do need their flowers. Brian Lake played one of the best fullback games of any grand final, and the Sam Mitchell decoy tag on Aaron Sandilands meant that Fremantle's hit-out advantage was basically nullified. Ross Lyon's game plan was to choke Hawthorn out and roll through them late, which is effectively how the game looked, and Hawthorn were good enough to withstand it. But despite Hawthorn ultimately winning, the final score does not do this game justice. Granted, it was not a pretty game of football. It was defensive and scrappy. Many of the goals came from free kicks. But what's interesting about this game goes deeper than just how it looked. Champion Data adjudged that this was the first grand final that was won by the poorer side on the day. The official stat keeper believes that the Fremantle Dockers should have won the Premiership in 2013. On face value, they had the same amount of scoring shots, but that never tells the full story. Teams kicking accurately can be explained by creating easier shots closer and straighter with good structure and play. But Champion Data went a lot deeper than that. Champion Data's Glenn Luff said that they examined every single shot on goal and compared Freo's efforts to that of the AFL average from each spot on the ground where the shots were taken, taking into account distance, angle, and perceived pressure. If both teams had kicked at an AFL average conversion rate from all of their shots on that day, the score would have read Hawthorn 13-10-88 to Fremantle 14-10-94. Factoring in rush behinds and out on the fulls, Freo actually had 5 more scoring shots on goal than the Hawks. Amazingly, despite this, Hawthorn led the game from start to finish, but it's clear to see that they were outplayed for significant periods of the match. Fremantle had better disposal efficiency, centre clearance numbers, inside 50 play, and it was a dead heat in disposal counts and possession. The shots Freo were missing weren't Dom Sheed style Hail Marys, they were regulation straight in front shoes. Nat Fyfe was one of Fremantle's best players on the ground, so he can sleep a little easier than some, but his efforts in front of goal were checked by himself after the game, admitting that his goal kicking let them down.
Pretty hard for me, clearly. Obviously I think about the opportunities I missed a fair bit and thought about them a lot over the break.
Hayden Ballantyne had a dog of a day, missing all 4 of his shots on goal, including an out on the full 25 metres out to put them back in striking distance in the 4th. Amazingly, despite kicking 1-6 in their first half, their most egregious period was when they had the last 8 scoring shots of the match and could only muster 2 goals for, with 2 out on the full. Glenn Luff did admit that grand final day pressure would be a different beast, and most of the Hawks boys having done it before would have made a massive difference. Ryan Crowley said that despite his 11 years of experience, he had never been more nervous than that day, and he couldn't imagine how it would have been for the younger guys.
That whole week was just a massive week, and it was a lot bigger than what I expected. There's nothing that sort of prepares you for that.
But the reality was that this young Fremantle side had never played in front of 100,000 people, and clearly, when the game was slowed down in front of goal and the players were able to open their senses, it got to them. Unfortunately, this story doesn't really have a happy ending. Fremantle stayed good for a few years under Ross, but they were never able to make it past prelim final weekend before that team eventually fizzled out. Nat Fyfe would go on to become Fremantle's greatest product, but there's a high likelihood that he'll never play in the Premiership side he so richly deserves. Instead, that grand final was merely remembered as the beginning of the Hawthorn dynasty, and not as one of the best and most unique grand finals of the century. But the truth is that a very different story should have been told that afternoon, and the hurt that that's caused the Dockers remains to this very day.